Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The International Criminal Court condemns US sanctions imposed by President Donald Trump and vows to continue providing justice. China toughens its stance on tariffs in the face of what it describes as US bullying, and it will impose its own taxes of up to 15% next week. The PGA Tour says it is closer to a deal with rival series Live Golf after calling on Trump to get involved. To our top story, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has just met with the US House Speaker of Representatives, Mike Johnson, a day after President Donald Trump signed an executive order targeting the International Criminal Court with sanctions. The ICC last year issued an arrest warrant for top Israeli officials, including Netanyahu, accusing him of committing war crimes in Gaza. But President Trump has called the move illegitimate, as Benji Haya reports.
Donald Trump taking on the world's top criminal court, a controversial but anticipated move by the 47th US president.
Well, of course, this decision was expected, but nevertheless, it really threatens to undermine international accountability for the worst crimes and deprive victims all across the globe of justice. This executive order puts the United States on the side of war criminals at the expense of victims of grave crimes seeking justice.
The Hague-based International Criminal Court has condemned Donald Trump's push for sanctions, which it says seeks to harm its independent and impartial judicial work, including its recent ruling against Israel.
The decision to issue an arrest warrant against me, the democratically elected Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and our former defense minister, was made by a rogue prosecutor who's trying to extricate himself from sexual harassment charges, and by biased judges who are motivated by anti-Semitic sentiments against the one and only Jewish state.
Israel and the United States don't recognise the ICC's jurisdiction. It's why Prime Minister Netanyahu wasn't arrested when he stood alongside his American counterpart in the White House earlier this week, where President Trump announced his audacious plan for the US to take control of Gaza. Only 2 weeks into his second term, the president is bringing his foreign policy offensive to every corner of the planet. Thousands of workers at the country's leading aid agency are being placed on leave, with employees locked out of the HQ in Washington, D.C., and 2/3 of staff stranded abroad, including in conflict zones. The US Agency for International Development has for decades provided humanitarian assistance to more than 100 countries, but it's been described as criminal and a waste by President Donald Trump's unelected advisor, Elon Musk, whose so-called Department of Government Efficiency is being tasked with gutting government finances.
We are going to fight this legally in every way we can.
The billionaire businessman's cost-cutting crusade has attracted a huge political and legal backlash. Donald Trump is even being sued over the Musk-motivated overhaul.
So the key issue with Musk's actions is that it's happening in this zone that we could best describe as a gray legal zone, or perhaps more accurately described as a zone of illegality.
The Trump administration says his proposals and actions on the global stage show he's thinking outside the box, as the White House looks to tip the scales in this rebalancing of democratic governance and the world order as a whole. Benji Haya, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
For more on this, I'm joined from the UK by Sir Howard Morrison, a former International Criminal Court judge. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining me. First of all, Benjamin Netanyahu has just delivered a press conference in Washington saying the ICC is scandalous, corrupt, and threatens the right of all democracies to defend themselves. What is your reaction to this claim?
That's a rather curious claim, considering there are 125 member states who are members of the court, including most of the Western democracies, and a great many other countries who are also democratic in their political nature. I mean, one of the fundamental mistakes that continues to be made is that people think that the ICC investigates and prosecutes states. It doesn't. International criminal law is only concerned with individual criminal responsibility. The ICC doesn't attack Israel or the United States or Russia for that matter. If there is a sufficient reason to investigate an individual, and it doesn't matter which country they come from or who that individual is, then it's incumbent upon the court, it's the duty of the court to conduct an investigation, because it normally involves the deaths of very large numbers of a civilian population.
Neither the US or Israel is a member of the ICC, but besides this, what kind of immediate impact will the sanctions have on the court, the judges and the member states?
It's really hard to say that at the moment, because we don't know exactly what the full nature of the proposed sanctions are. One reads that it's likely to include visa sanctions against individual members of the court and possibly financial sanctions against the court in general. But all that is going to do is to slow the progress of international justice. And if you've been involved, as I have, in international justice for 25 years and seen some of the horrific things that I've seen and had to deal with, one would hope that other people would be keen on pursuing those matters. It's not a question of prejudice against a state or an individual. It's a question of investigating a complaint and doing so independently.
I just wanted to actually speak to you about justice. The Hague is currently investigating Israel's actions during its war with Hamas. Figures suggest over 47,500 Palestinians have lost their lives. Will they ever be able to get justice or get to the truth of what's really gone on?
Well, that's a matter for evidence, and I'm not going to speculate about evidence of what actually happened to cause the death of all of those people. That would frankly be unfair, because I haven't, as many other people haven't, been able to examine what has been produced by way of complaint and evidence. But unless there is a judicial process, you're right, the chances of anybody, whether they're from Gaza or from a state in Africa or South America or Europe, getting justice is very remote.
The ICC is an impartial court, as you said. Do you think Trump's actions could impact the court's reputation longer term and deter any serious investigations or work that could be interpreted as being against the interests of the United States in the future?
Well, I suppose that's a possibility. But you've got to remember, and this is really very important, that the ICC is a court of last resort. It doesn't have primacy over domestic jurisdictions. They have primacy. So if a domestic jurisdiction is properly investigating a complaint, then the ICC does not step in. And for instance, Israel has a very fine independent judiciary. And if Israel was investigating the complaint against individuals in Israel, whoever they are, then the ICC would not and could not exercise jurisdiction.
Sir Howard Morrison, a former UK judge at the International Criminal Court, thank you so much for joining me with your insights this evening.
You're very welcome.
Now, China says it will protect its own interests in the face of US bullying, signalling a change in tone following a new 10% tariff on Chinese goods imposed by the Trump administration. China's Commerce Ministry says the new tariffs will exacerbate global trade tensions. Laura Westbrook has more.
In a sign that Beijing is toughening its tone, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce spokeswoman He Yongqian told reporters on Thursday that in the face of one-sided acts of bullying, China will definitely take necessary measures to firmly protect its own rights and interests. Previously, Beijing has emphasized a willingness to negotiate, and this is in response to US President Donald Trump's imposition of a new 10% tariff on Chinese goods. He says it's in retaliation for China's role in allowing the drug fentanyl into America. Beijing says its role in the fentanyl trade is just a pretext to impose the tariffs. Now, China said it would impose its own duties of up to 15% on US liquefied natural gas and selected products starting on Monday. It also tightened export controls on critical minerals. And analysts say that this move was a calculated response by Beijing. Earlier this week, Donald Trump signaled that a call would soon happen with Chinese President Xi Jinping, but then he said that he was in no rush to speak with Xi, and that's put that call up in the air. Now, a call between the two leaders was seen as being key to potentially ease or even delay tariffs, as conversations with Mexican and Canadian leaders saw Trump give a last-minute reprieve to both those countries on Monday. And Chinese officials are entering potential talks with less bargaining room as China exports over 3 times more goods to the US than it buys. China is also dealing with an economy that is slowing and has doubled down on high-end manufacturing, such as electric vehicles, to grow, while dealing with a protracted property crisis, high youth unemployment, and weak consumer spending. Meanwhile, here in Hong Kong, the government says it will launch a complaint with the World Trade Organization in response to those additional 10% tariffs on products from the city. A government spokesman said that the new tariffs ignored Hong Kong's status as a separate customs territory from mainland China. Now, back in 2020, the Trump administration decided that Hong Kong was no longer sufficiently autonomous to justify differential treatment from China, and that move followed the Beijing-imposed national security law that was in response to widespread anti-government protests the year before.
Laura Westbrook in Hong Kong, thank you very much. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Grenfell Tower in London will be demolished following a deadly fire in 2017, which killed 72 people. According to the government, the dismantling of the building is expected to take around 2 years and will be carried out with sensitivity. Grenfell United has accused the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner of ignoring the voices of people who lost family in the fire. 3 former Harrods employees have accused Mohammed Al Fayed's only surviving brother of sexually assaulting them, speaking publicly for the first time. The women say Ali Fayed assaulted them in the 1990s when he and his brothers owned the famous store. A spokesperson for Mr. Fayed says the businessman does deny all the allegations. Now, a British con man who featured in a Netflix documentary has been sentenced to 6 years in prison by a French court for deliberately ramming 2 police officers with his car as he attempted a getaway. Robert Hendy Freegard was nicknamed the Puppet Master because of his career as a serial swindler. He was previously convicted and given a life sentence in the UK in 2005 for both kidnapping and fraud. And reptile handlers in Australia have been left stunned after finding 102 snakes in a backyard in Sydney. They were originally called to rescue a bunch of red-bellied black snakes. The reptiles are one of the most common venomous species in Australia. Now, the PGA Tour says it is closer to a deal with rival series Live Golf after calling on American President Donald Trump to get involved. Trump met with the PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan and player director Adam Scott this week as the organisation seeks to help with talks with Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, which does back Live. A statement from Moynihan, Adam Scott and Tiger Woods said that they are grateful that Trump's leadership has brought them closer to a final deal, paving the way for reunification of men's professional golf. On Wednesday, it was announced that this year's US Open will become the first major to provide players on the LIV Tour with an exemption for the tournament that's based on rankings. Live Golf star and five-time Ryder Cup winner Ian Poulter joined Al Arabiya news correspondent Michal Prendergast at Live Golf season 2025 opener in Riyadh. Let's take a look at some of what he had to say.
Ian Poulter, the first thing I'd like to ask you, this is going to be played under lights. The first time a tournament has ever been played under lights. How has your preparation been for that in terms of, obviously, you've got the lies, you've got the greens. How's that prep been?
It's been good. It's been, for me, half man, half mattress. I like to lay in. So obviously teeing off at 6 p.m. Is going to be very different. But from a golf playability perspective, it's new, it's innovative. Like when you see it as it is now, it looks very different at night. So it's going to be a good test for us all, I think, to be able to, really kind of pick your lines off the tee visually. It looks a little different at night to what it does in the day. So get your homework done over these few days to, to be able to select, exactly where you want to hit it. And it's a challenge, but it's a great challenge. The lights, obviously very different. Standing there, you'll have the odd shadow, kind of, which you have to get used to when you're setting up over the ball. But I think it's brilliant. I mean, I think for us to, showcase Live Golf and do it in a slightly different way and make it a bit more fun, you'll see that over the coverage. It'll be awesome.
And speaking about Live Golf, obviously, the Live Opener is here in Riyadh for the first time. Everyone's talking about it. How excited are you?
I'm very excited. I think all of us, we've played obviously before Royal Greens, but for us to come to Riyadh, I think is special. Live Golf themselves, concerts on all throughout the weekend, which is fantastic. And, it's great to be able to get a little bit more culture here to see the city and, take it all in.
It's well documented your fashion sense on the course. Are you planning any any glow in the dark?
Well, no glow in the dark. Castor, our new sponsor, we're pretty proud to obviously launch that this week. It'll be the first time, out in the new gear this week. So, yeah, I feel, even though it's not quite bright colours, but it looks great. We're very, very happy with our new clothing sponsor.
So, as competitive as golf is now, we're obviously going into a Ryder Cup here. You're known as Mr. Ryder Cup. Do you ever see yourself coming back into the fray? Obviously, there's talk of Donald Trump. He said in one phone call in 15 minutes, he would get a merger done. I know it's not going to be a merger. It's going to be an investment from Live into the PGA. Is that ever possible? I know a lot of fans, they'd love to see you back.
Look, never say never, right? As it stands today, that isn't an option for me. But look, things change quite quickly, like we've seen, in the golf landscape. So let's see how things play out. You never know.
Michael Jordan has said the one thing he's afraid of on a golf course is Ian Poulter. What are you afraid of on a golf course?
What am I afraid of? Well, I've never played against Michael, so I wouldn't know if I have to be afraid with him on the course. But maybe one day I'll get that opportunity to take him on. that would be quite fun. But no, there's nothing really that I'm afraid of. I don't like snakes. I don't like, those animals with no shoulders. That's about the only thing I'm afraid of.
You heard it here first. It's from Michael Jordan. The challenge has been set. So that would break a lot of numbers on social media. Obviously, if you've seen Bryson DeChambeau has done amazing things on YouTube with his Break 50 series.
Yep.
Do you have any plans to engage the world of social media in your own way going forward?
Yeah, I think in the not too distant future, you might see a digital channel coming out. So you'll have to wait and see.
Ian Poulter, thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. Some breaking news. Hamas has released the names of 3 Israeli hostages it says will be released on Saturday. The hostages are Eli Sharabi, Ohad Ben Ami and Or Levy. So those are the 3 hostages that Hamas said will be released tomorrow. Now, residents living in a suburb of Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires, were alarmed when they saw a nearby canal had turned bright red. Local media reports suggest the colour may have been caused by the dumping of textile dye or by chemical waste. The Environment Ministry said in a statement that water samples had been taken to determine the cause of the colour change. An Australian politician has legally changed his name to Austin Trump in a move inspired by President Donald Trump. Ben Dawkins, who's an independent MP in Western Australia, is now listed as Aussie Trump on the WA parliamentary website. He said it was a protest against the ruling centre-left Labour Party. And King Charles and Queen Camilla will be joined by a Hollywood star, Stanley Tucci, for a black tie dinner tonight. The occasion is to celebrate Italian cuisine ahead of their state visit to Italy and the Vatican. Buckingham Palace confirmed the tour will take place in early April, coinciding with Charles and Camilla's 20th wedding anniversary. The rapper and fashion designer Kanye West has announced he's been diagnosed with autism. The superstar has also revealed he was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder before finding out he did have the condition. He spoke openly about his experience on a popular podcast called The Download. Let's take a look.
I went to this doctor, one that worked with Justin Bieber, one that worked with, I'm not even going to name other names and stuff. My wife took me to do that because she said, something about your personality doesn't feel like it's bipolar. I've seen bipolar before. She's educated, so I've seen bipolar before. And come to find out, it's really a case of autism that I have. And autism takes you to a Rain Man thing where you're like, oh man, I'm going to wear this Trump hat, because I just like Trump in general. And then when people tell you to not do it, you just get on that one point.
For more on this, I'm now joined by entertainment journalist Stephanie Takyi in London. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. First of all, Stephanie, Kanye has spoken openly about his mental health for years and even referring to it in his music. What has he said about his autism diagnosis?
Well, Leigh Ann, it has been quite surprising that Kanye West has now come out with this autism diagnosis, because for years he's been talking about his battle with bipolar. But, over the past few years, Kanye West has had many controversial moments, including when he was wearing the MAGA hat again, Make America Great Again, which he's now saying was down to his autism, because he says with his autism, as we know, it's not one size fits all. But for him, he says when people tell him not to to do things, that's when he becomes quite fixated on doing the opposite to prove a point. We've seen him lose lucrative deals like he did in 2022 with Adidas over following anti-Semitic remarks. Again, Kanye West is saying that he's been able to distinguish now between when he's having a bad mental health episode and now what he calls going through autism. So for him, it's quite new. And for the public, it is quite surprising because he is one of the most controversial characters now. And it's hard to tarnish people with autism with one brush now. And Kanye West is someone who is now on the spectrum.
Stephanie, what I find really interesting is, as you say, Kanye West has gone through a lot of ups and downs, controversies, but this is actually quite brave of him to come out and speak about having autism and about being misdiagnosed in the past. What does this mean for the rap world, for the music industry as a whole?
It's very refreshing, Leigh Ann, because, you know, we know when it comes to hip hop and rap, traditionally, they like to keep up this hard man image. And I think for Kanye West, he has been quite vulnerable. He's very vulnerable in his music. And I think this is very refreshing for someone in Hollywood and someone in the music industry like hip hop to be quite open about this. I think, you know, even if we take it down to race within the Black community, autism is not something that's really discussed. So sometimes you do need someone like a figurehead like Kanye West to kind of change the narrative and say, actually, autism doesn't look one way, it can look in a variety of ways. So I think when someone like this strikes a match, it lights the way for others to also communicate about their battles.
Yes, absolutely. Stephanie, I agree. He's got a reputation for always being in the spotlight, and he actually has a new album coming out later this year. I know this is a really difficult question to answer, but what do you think he'll do next? We see Kanye doing a lot of things, but what's next for him?
Kanye West is really unpredictable. This new album is going to be called Bully, and it's going to be released on his daughter's North's birthday on June 15th. But to be honest, I think right now in this entertainment world that we live in, I would not be surprised if Kanye is working on a documentary, especially as there's much interest at the moment between him and his wife, Bianca Censori. And I think as Kanye is slowly trying to get back into the public good books, we want to see what's really going behind the scenes. And you're seeing a lot of artists these days, when they're coming out with an album, it's not just an album. You need to do a documentary with it. You need to do a concert with it. But Kanye is a loose cannon, so we're going to have to watch this space.
Yes, I hope you come back on to speak to us a little bit more about the Showbiz wedding. Yeah, thank you. Stephanie, Takyi, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you. Let's take a look at the top business news. India has cut interest rates for the first time in nearly 5 years to counter slowing growth in Asia's third largest economy. The Reserve Bank of India reduced its repo rate from 6.5 to 6.25%, in line with expectations of many economists. Now, US employers added just 143,000 jobs last month, but the unemployment rate fell to 4% at the beginning of this year. The first monthly jobs report of Donald Trump's second presidency suggests he has inherited a solid labor market. Economists had expected about 170,000 new jobs in January. Turning to sports news now. The former interpreter of LA Dodgers baseball star Shohei Ohtani has been sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison for a fraud and gambling scheme. Ippei Muzaharu was ordered to pay back nearly $17 million that he had stolen from the athlete and another $1 million in taxes. He pleaded guilty to bank and tax fraud charges. Now, the Super Bowl is one of the most prestigious events in the sporting calendar and attracts millions of viewers each year. The Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs will face each other on Sunday in New Orleans. US President Donald Trump is reportedly attending the Super Bowl. And here's a reminder of our top stories. The International Criminal Court condemns US sanctions imposed by President Donald Trump and vows to continue providing justice. China toughens its stance on tariffs in the face of what it describes as US bullying, and it will impose its own taxes of up to 15% next week. The PGA Tour says it's closer to a deal with rival series Live Golf after calling on Donald Trump to get involved. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. The Dressing Room is coming up next, and don't miss Tom Berger's Watson with GNT. Good night and happy Friday.